I spent 8 years working myself to the bone, sacrificing my 20s, my savings, and my sanity to pay off my parents' mortgage and save them from losing everything, only to find out yesterday that they secretly rewrote their entire will to leave absolutely everything to my golden child younger brother, who hasn't worked a single honest day in his life. When I confronted them about it, they didn't even look guilty. They just looked me in the eye and told me that because I am successful, I don't need the money, while my brother needs a safety net. Was I wrong for what I did next, or would you have completely cut them off and demanded every single penny back just like I did? Let me take you back to the very beginning so you can truly understand the depth of this betrayal. 8 years ago, I was 24, fresh out of college, and finally starting to make a decent living in software engineering. I was working long hours, living in a cramped apartment with 2 roommates, and eating instant noodles just so I could build up a solid savings account. I had big dreams of buying my own home, maybe starting a business, and finally enjoying the fruits of my hard work. But one Tuesday evening, my mother called me, sobbing so hard I could barely understand her. Through her tears, she managed to explain that my dad's business had collapsed. They were drowning in credit card debt, and most terrifyingly of all, they were 3 months behind on their mortgage payments. The bank was threatening foreclosure. They were on the verge of losing the only home they had ever known, the house where my brother and I grew up. I rushed over to their place immediately, and when I walked through the door, the atmosphere was suffocating. My dad, who had always been a proud, stubborn man, was sitting at the kitchen table with his head in his hands, surrounded by past due notices and legal documents. My mother was packing the floor, her eyes red and swollen. And then there was my younger brother, Leo. Leo was 21 at the time, sitting on the couch, playing video games on his console, completely detached from the reality of the situation, acting as if the world wasn't crumbling around him. Seeing my parents in that state broke something inside me. I felt an overwhelming sense of responsibility as the eldest son. I sat down with my dad, went through the paperwork, and realized the situation was even worse than they had admitted. They didn't just need a temporary loan. They needed a consistent, long-term financial lifeline to keep the roof over their heads. I didn't hesitate. I told them that night that I would take over the mortgage payments. I promised them that as long as I was standing, they wouldn't lose their home. My parents wept with relief, hugging me and calling me their savior, promising me that they would find a way to make it up to me, and that this house would eventually be my legacy anyway. I felt a profound sense of pride and purpose. I went back to my tiny apartment, adjusted my budget, and began transferring a massive chunk of my monthly salary directly to their mortgage lender. To make ends meet and ensure I could still save a little bit for my own future, I started taking on freelance side gigs, working 14-hour days, 7 days a week. I stopped going out with friends, skipped vacations, and put my entire personal life on hold. Every time I felt exhausted, every time I wanted to quit, I reminded myself that I was protecting my family. Meanwhile, Leo continued to live his life without a care in the world. He dropped out of college, claiming it was too stressful, and moved back into the very house I was paying for. My parents never pushed him to get a job. Instead, they coddled him, making excuses about how he was still finding himself and how the economy was tough for young people. When I gently suggested that Leo could get a part-time job at a grocery store to help contribute to the grocery bills, my mother got defensive, accusing me of being jealous of my brother and reminding me that not everyone was as naturally gifted or lucky as I was. It baffled me how my hard work was consistently chalked up to luck, while Leo's laziness was treated as a fragile emotional state that needed to be protected. But I let it go because I loved my parents and I wanted to keep the peace. Years rolled by. 4 years turned into 6, and 6 turned into 8. Over those 8 years, I poured over $150,000 into that property. Because of my steady financial life support, my parents were able to breathe easily again, their credit recovered, and they eventually reached a point where the house was fully paid off. The day the mortgage satisfaction piece arrived in the mail, we celebrated with a family dinner. My dad raised a glass to me, giving a moving speech about how I was the rock of the family and how they could never repay me for what I had done. I felt a deep sense of accomplishment. I had done it. My family was safe. But a few weeks ago, the illusion came shattering down. My dad had a minor health scare and was hospitalized for a couple of days. It wasn't life-threatening, thank goodness, but it was a wake-up call for him to get his affairs in order. He asked me to go to their house, find a specific blue folder in his home office file cabinet, and bring it to the hospital so he could check some insurance details. When I found the folder, I noticed a document peeking out from behind the insurance paperwork. It was legal stationery from a local estate planning attorney, dated just 3 months prior. Curiosity got the better of me, and I pulled it out. It was my parents' newly revised last will and testament. As I scanned the pages, my heart dropped into my stomach, and the blood rushed out of my face. The document explicitly stated that upon the passing of both of my parents, their primary asset, the entire family home, the very house I had spent the last 8 years paying for, was to be left solely and exclusively to my brother, Leo. I was completely written out of the property inheritance. The only mention of my name in the entire document was a single, insulting clause stating that I was to receive a small collection of my father's old books and personal effects, because I was already financially secure and did not require real estate assets. I stood there in their quiet home office, holding that piece of paper, trembling with a mixture of disbelief, sorrow, and white-hot rage. 8 years of my life. 8 years of turning down social invitations, working late into the night, sacrificing my own dreams of homeownership, all so my parents could live in peace, only for them to take the asset I bought for them and hand it on a silver platter to the person who hadn't contributed a single dollar. It felt like a physical punch to the gut. I took a deep breath, photographed every single page of the document with my phone, put the folder back exactly as I found it, and drove to the hospital, pretending everything was fine because my dad was still recovering. But inside, I was planning my confrontation. I waited until my dad was discharged and back home, giving it a week so he would be strong enough to handle a serious conversation. So that is the unbelievable situation I found myself in, sitting on a ticking time bomb of a secret while looking at the people I loved most in the world, knowing they had completely betrayed me. Before I tell you how the confrontation went down, the ultimate revenge I took, and how it completely blew our family apart, I want you to pause right now and drop a comment below. What would you have done if you discovered your parents did this to you? Would you have stayed quiet to keep the peace, or would you have demanded justice? Let me know, because I really need to know if my reaction was justified. The next weekend, I invited myself over to their house for dinner. Leo was there, of course, sitting at the dining table, complaining about how hard it was to find a job that truly aligned with his passion. I sat through the meal in near silence, biding my time. Once the dinner plates were cleared and we were all sitting in the living room, I pulled out my phone, pulled up the photos of the will, and laid it face up on the coffee table. The room went dead silent. My mother looked at the phone, then looked up at me, her face turning pale. My dad cleared his throat, trying to adopt his usual authoritative tone, and asked me what the meaning of this was. I looked him dead in the eye and asked him how they could do this to me. I asked them how they could take the house that I paid for, the house that they promised would be my legacy, and leave it entirely to Leo. My dad sighed, rubbing his temples, and said that they didn't want me to find out this way, but that I needed to understand their perspective. He said that I was a successful software engineer making 6 figures, that I already had a great life, and that I didn't need a house. Leo, on the other hand, had nothing. Leo was struggling, and they needed to make sure he had a roof over his head when they were gone. My mother jumped in, her voice shrill, saying that a family is supposed to support each other, and that I was being incredibly selfish for begrudging my brother a secure future. Leo just sat there, smirking, and actually had the audacity to say that since I was so rich, it shouldn't matter to me anyway, and that I should be happy he was being taken care of. Hearing those words come out of his mouth made something snap inside me. I realized in that exact moment that they didn't view me as a son or a brother. They viewed me as a bank account. They had used my love, my loyalty, and my sense of duty to fund their lives and secure Leo's future, while completely disregarding my own sacrifices. I stood up, looked at all 3 of them, and told them that if they thought I was going to let them roll over me, they were horribly mistaken. I reminded my parents that while I had paid the mortgage directly to the lender, I had kept every single bank statement, every confirmation email, and every transaction receipt for the last 8 years. I had a meticulously documented paper trail showing exactly where that $150,000 came from. I told them that they had two choices. Either they immediately sit down with a lawyer, rip up that will, and create a new agreement where the house would be divided equally or reflect my financial contribution, or I would take legal action to claw back every single dollar I had put into the property under the grounds of unjust enrichment and breach of oral contract. My dad laughed, scoffing that I couldn't sue my own parents and that no court would take me seriously because it was a gift. I looked him dead in the eye and told him to test me. I walked out of the house, slamming the door behind me, ignoring my mother's screams calling me an ungrateful monster. The very next morning, I retained a high-powered real estate and estate litigation attorney. I presented him with the extensive paper trail of my payments, along with text messages from my parents over the years, explicitly thanking me for paying the mortgage and promising that the house would be mine one day. My lawyer smiled and assured me that we had an incredibly strong case for a constructive trust or an equitable lien on the property. We drafted a formal demand letter, giving my parents 30 days to either legally secure my interest in the home or face a lawsuit for the full repayment of the $150,000, plus interest. When the process server delivered the letter to their door, all hell broke loose. My phone exploded with calls and messages from my parents, my aunts, my uncles, and even cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. I was being branded as a villain, a heartless child who was trying to evict his elderly parents and ruin his family over greed. My mother left a voicemail weeping, asking how I could do this to the people who raised me. But I stood firm. I blocked everyone who harassed me, maintaining communication only through my attorney. Seeing that I was completely serious and refused to back down, my parents' bravado completely crumbled. They didn't have the money to hire a lawyer to fight me, let alone pay back $150,000. Realizing they were cornered, they finally agreed to settle. Under the terms of the legally binding settlement we signed last week, my parents were forced to execute a new deed creating a joint tenancy with rights of survivorship, nomming me as a co-owner of the house immediately, meaning they cannot sell it, borrow against it, or change the inheritance without my explicit written consent. Furthermore, upon their passing, 70% of the property's value will automatically belong to me, with only 30% going to Leo, and my share is completely protected from any future attempts by them to rewrite their will. Leo is absolutely furious because his dream of inheriting a free whole house without working a day in his life has been completely shattered, and he now realizes he will actually have to get a job to support himself in the future. My relationship with my parents is completely dead. They treat me with a cold, formal distance, and I have stopped visiting them or providing any financial assistance whatsoever. Looking back on this entire mess, I don't feel guilty at all. I learned the hard way that blood doesn't protect you from betrayal, and sometimes the people you sacrifice the most for are the ones who will take you for granted the fastest. I stood up for myself when my own family tried to erase my hard work, and I protected my future from their manipulation. If you ever find yourself in a situation where your kindness is being treated as a weakness, please take this as your sign to stand your ground, protect your assets, and never let anyone exploit your love for them. If you think I did the right thing by legally forcing my parents' hand and protecting my hard-earned money, please hit that like button to show your support. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more crazy, intense real-life stories just like this one. And definitely drop your final thoughts on this whole family nightmare in the comments section below. I read every single one of them. Thank you so much for listening. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you all in the next story.